I'm really, really intrigued by how you are implementing AI in your everyday activity. I'm actually very, very impressed. I see the things that are coming across on a regular basis from you. How did you get that mentality going? How did you start going, okay, what kind of tools can I do? Is it because you were like, I'm trying to build a company with fewer employees? What was that thought process that made you be like, I'm going to go find as many AI tools as I can to be efficient?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just to start off, I'm an early adopter to a lot of technology. Um, Folks around me probably hate that I always upgrade my iPhone every year. So even before AI, I've always been kind of, how do you get into the new trends of technology and like what's new and then play around with it? Obviously, with the advent of AI tools, jumping into like GPT 4.0, for instance, this is before I started Anyreach, where you know my career was in product, and I was like, how do I streamline the thing I hate the most, which is writing requirements? And for any PMs out there, you probably know the specking things out and typing things in detail. Man, it is like grunt work, if you will, right? And writing a bunch of pages and just trying to communicate information. And obviously with the invention of GPT, I realized, wow, I can actually streamline a lot of my work. Where before I had to be extremely detailed, every single kind of use case and edge case I had to define. And now with AI, it's like I can write up like chicken scratch on like a feature that I want, give it a pretty relatively detailed prompt of what I'm looking for, and boom, what would have taken me probably a handful of days or maybe even a week could be finished in maybe like 15 minutes, right? So that was kind of my first dip into AI tools, and obviously with a lot of the innovation that's coming out with agentic capabilities, I was like, there's got to be companies building easier ways to like optimize and be more productive. So I've been kind of on the ground floor, just consuming all the different tools and signing up and playing with them. And that's really kind of been the driver. That obviously evolved into, hey, I want to build a smaller and leaner team. And how do I do that? Well, AI can actually get us there. So
That's interesting. On one of the things that you had sent pre this conversation was like, okay, how are you thinking about AI and whatnot? And I can't remember who I was talking to, or maybe it was a video. Oh no, it was one of the VCs we were chatting with. And there was a CEO that came out, and I guess he said, like, you don't actually start using AI on a regular basis until you do one full week
mm,
of using one tool. So what that means is, like, you have to go use ChatGPT like every single day. And if you do that for 1 week, you now have the bug and you will start seeing the efficiencies and so forth. And I think one thing at Ambassador, I I think there are people in the organization that have done that,
mm,
but I do think that there are it still is really difficult to bring along when you have 35 employees, to bring along the whole organization. And I'm curious, those bigger organizations, they're all like, "Oh, we got our AI strategy. We got it." It's like, I actually, if it's tough for a 35-person company to do
it's
it,
almost near impossible for a big one.
yeah, you're like, are you really doing it, or are you just kind of slapping on some open AI and whatnot? Um, and and so I'm always intrigued by like how efficient you've become, Richard, with your business. And I'll tell you, it is. And I told you this, that you have actually become the working model that I really want to push on Ambassador, our company, because I think it's not just the efficiency that you gain, where you're building AI tools for your clients or your customers, right? But the efficiency you gain by the internal team doing it, because I think there's this mirror that can occur, that
Mm,
when you use the tools day to day, or you're kind of like you said, just looking and digesting it and see what efficiencies, that then gets tracked into the product and AI tools that you're building for your clients. Like with us, that hero and the feedback bot and all these things, it actually took us internally adopting some of the tools that you and I have communicated with, and the efficiency loads that we're getting, where a normal sprint would take us like, 8 weeks or 12 weeks. We're now able to do it in 2 weeks.
Right.
I think now people go, wait a second, then if I can do this internally, why can't we turn this feature on for our clients to make their life easier? So I think, to the point as you bring up how you guys are thinking about it, it's that you are actually giving us the mirroring effect. Even, we're a little bit larger of a company, not much, but it's just kind of that ripple effect that occurs. When, and I don't know the size of your clients, but curious, when you do, if you do have some of those larger clients, how do you get them to think about it? Or maybe you have an opinion, like how do you get people to think about that
Yeah.
implementation?
No, that's a great question. I think we're very early. I would say the first inning of AI. We work with a lot of larger clients that are more of the pen and paper industry. So I just use like healthcare, for example. These folks, like, they think AI is Siri, right? And so GPT is like not even on their radar. And a lot of times, they know conceptually that, oh, AI is this like, amazing thing. They've actually never used it themselves. And what usually opens up the conversation is to actually do a show and tell. Because we can tell them, hey, there's all these great AI tools, there's Anyreach as a platform and so on and so forth that will increase efficiency, but until people actually see how it works, it's very hard for them to adopt it, right? Kind of to the point that you mentioned the VC, playing around with GPT for about a week. There's an onboarding friction, if you will, for AI tools, because what ends up happening is a lot of the interface to get the benefits of AI is usually like a chat, right? And you have to prompt it correctly. And most folks, at this point in time, don't really know how to prompt engineer, if you will. And so they'll maybe like write one sentence as a request to AI and get an output that doesn't really meet that aha moment, right? And so right away they're like, I don't know if I really want to invest more time into it. It doesn't seem like it's actually doing what it's promising, or what I've heard. And so one of the things that we do internally is workshops. I have a culture doc, which I call vibe coding, if you will, where it's a big repository, if you will, of like our standards, how we think about AI, how we apply it, the different tools, and even specific like Twitter threads and YouTube tutorials and things like that. I even record myself on Loom, going through a process of setting up AI and like kind of show, here's the overall goal and the use case. Now let me go implement this with an AI solution within like 2 minutes, and look at that. The thing that I was spending a week on, an hour a day manually, all of a sudden is fully automated. And so I think really kind of showing how the process works and how easy it is to get set up generally helps the steer the conversation for folks to be more readily available to adopt it and remove biases and so on and so forth. But that's kind of key, is like really showing folks how it's done, and seeing the end benefit, the end outcome of that work, utilizing AI. So
Yeah, it's interesting. When we look at the 200 global clients that we have, we've deployed the AI component, which is Hero, and we actually ate our own dog food, right? So we went out and we sent this out and said, hey, give us feedback on Ambassador. And we had some early adopters engage, and I think we're now starting to get those people coming back and saying like, hey, we want to implement this to our customers. I think that there's a huge win in your guys' business logic. We're already using it and it's really, really good. But to that note, I was actually talking to a VC, it was like a week or two ago, and one of their AI companies earlier than us are running into huge procurement issues at bigger companies. So because it's what you were saying, there's this early inning of AI that's coming, or it's here. And I don't think these big brands or enterprise, mid to enterprise, know what to do with it, right? If it's an internal tool, that's easier. But the minute it goes out, it's like, well, wait a second, what are you doing with my data?
right.
How does it work? That type of stuff. this may be a loaded question, but it is kind of to the outline of Ambassador. We aren't seeing that as much right now because they're already our clients, and I think we understand that the PII is not going to be leveraged from an AI perspective. It's more of the exhaust. So it's kind of how do the units correlate on an ICP or domain basis and so forth. I'm curious in your experience, in the data space as well, and kind of some of the things you're seeing. Where do you feel these brands are going to go? And I know it's a crystal ball, but I'd love to know what you're thinking about that, because I think it is it's just going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think the media and the news makes it out to be this horrible thing. But if you use it right, it's going to change the way that we work. I mean, it really is. It's not going to replace humans. I think the humans that use it and utilize it, it's going to change their workload and productivity. I mean, I'm already seeing it. I'm getting 2 times, 3 times the work that I normally would with tasks writing emails, responding, meetings, that type of stuff. So I'm curious from your standpoint, as these SaaS companies go and sell the AI tools and so forth, how do you think that data security and privacy in this first inning all the way up to 5th inning would be?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think data security, protecting your end clients, customers is going to be key. I mean, you know, one of the verticals we target right now is healthcare, which is like probably the most strict around data privacy, around HIPAA compliance, and so forth. So it's always part of the conversation, like where does this data go? Do we get to house it ourselves? Are you using this data to train your agents for other clients? So these kind of questions always come up. But just like any sort of implementation where you're going into enterprise, generally, all the SOC Type 2, HIPAA, GDPR, these are all kind of table stakes, to work with these large companies. But I would say the additional flavor around AI is, what do you ultimately do with this data? Do you store it somewhere? Is it protected? Are you utilizing it and sending it off to like OpenAI, for instance? And then all of a sudden, if you have a breach, what happens, right? So I think with any sort of AI implementation, especially for enterprise, you have to have an option where whether they're using a cloud service like AWS, GCP, Azure, that they're able to actually self-host this data and be able to train their own agents and models using kind of your AI solution, if you will. There's also on-prem talks. We don't actually pursue those opportunities, but that's going to be a key area as well for more data control, where enterprises are more comfortable actually deploying kind of an AI solution. So I would say most of the same requirements to work with enterprise are generally there, just with a little bit more nuance, but nothing that's too strict, if you will, to actually get a full implementation through. The second thing I would mention is at least from our experience, any of the enterprise clients generally are more receptive to doing a pilot rather than like a full rollout. I mean, it's, give or take, right? But it helps them get their feet wet into AI on a very specific use case that's controlled, versus saying like, hey, we're gonna give you the solution and it's gonna talk to every one of your patients, customers, whatever you want to call it. And then, all of a sudden they're having some fear of like, whoa, what happens if we just like open the kimono or, Pandora's box, right? Is it going to go completely south? And so it's always better to, work on a very specific use case and really well defined, get all the key stakeholders and have a controlled environment where in the pilot, you don't necessarily have to actually interact with real customers. It could just be kind of a testing phase, if you will. Whether it's dummy data or actors or so on and so forth, to show the efficiencies of AI, but also the safety of it as well. So, and in post-pilot, you determine, okay, how many people do we actually want to roll this out to, like your real customers, and we can start small, right, to control it. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000, and once that looks good, let's do the full rollout as you see fit. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that's the kind of conversations we're in this infant stage at Ambassador. That we call it Ambassador 3.0 plus, right? So it's this, the newest version of Ambassador, which it's really around conversational commerce and really taking on how consumers are conversating with other consumers. So a lot of SaaS companies will come at it from a brand perspective, which I think is really important. But we're actually taking it from the customer journey objects. So what is that relationship you're trying to build with the customer? And then we're building a platform around that. And I think what we're finding in the early conversations with clients or prospects around our AI tooling that we have, it is that pilot controlled thing. We're even getting it. If you look at a parent company, they're going, "Oh, I've got a couple, divisions that I think would be very interested in this. What would you think about kind of scraping their website, and allowing the AI tool so that just the internal team can feel it?" And I feel like you said, it's almost turns into this: how do we get the internal team to feel it first? They react to it. They're like, yeah, this is kind of cool. And then you move to the next level. And then, like you said, the next level. And then there's a deployment. But, I do think that AI tooling, like if you're using stuff like a agentic AI bot, to deploy it across your entire customer base as a mid or enterprise client, I think I don't know how long that is till they do it. I feel like that is a year off plus, because there's too many outliers that I think it just are going to occur. And it was interesting because the same VC we were talking about, he said, also it changes the dynamics of the purchaser, right? So you have to look at who's buying the product as well. So if with our product today, it's your director, VP level person in marketing. The minute that you want to deploy an AI functionality that has the ability to be proactive or agentic, then now where it could go in the conversation, you've now moved up to the C level. Because the C level has to make that decision and go, am I willing to take the risk for a higher reward? And now it's going to take more time, maybe more procurement, even if you already have a contract. And we're seeing that even with some of our clients today, where the conversation started here and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then it moved up.
Let me push it up to the next guy, and then it's
Yeah. And that's it. And so to your point, I think it's interesting how you talk about that pilot, but I wonder how much of that pilot's now like, hey, could you go scrape some of these components, let our internal team feel it first, then we'll do it to a smaller subset. Maybe it's our beta group that we don't care or they don't care. They understand what we're doing. And then maybe now we parse out the data a little bit more. But it's just interesting how you think about these brands, these larger ones starting to take on AI and how they think about it. And it's going to be in this branch type ecosystem.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that where more stakeholders get involved in a conversation, right? You might talk to someone in marketing or sales or customer experience, service, and so forth, and it's like, oh wait, so AI can do all this. Let me pull in this other guy, right? And all of a sudden you have a full room of folks. But one of the things that we found pretty interesting, and it's maybe a little bit off tangent, is generally when we go into a kind of a discovery call, we present our solution like, fully autonomous AI, multi-channel, and so forth. The initial thought process is, oh, this can help solve kind of like your basic use cases, like, oh, calling handling calls, for instance, right? Basic order refund, right? Type of conversations, or maybe lead qualification. And as we're doing that discovery, we try to expand their mind and their thoughts, because AI is obviously still very new. It's kind of like the advent of the internet or mobile. There was so many more use cases that came out of it. Just using like the smartphone, for example, that would Uber wouldn't have happened, right, without a mobile device, right? And that use case just didn't exist before. So if you told people, hey, guess what, you can press a button on this thing and someone's going to pick you up in like 2 minutes and take you somewhere, and it's frictionless. Prior to Uber, people would have thought you were crazy, right? And so we try to expand kind of the discovery process by saying, what are other opportunities that you probably could have approached, but you couldn't today because of human labor, right? The economics don't make sense. So one example that we give them to help, kind of ideate is We have a client, they do a lot of digital marketing, Facebook ads, Google ads, and traditionally they're sending their traffic to like a website, and they're assuming that the users are going to be able to choose their own adventure, click through, and know about your business, and say, okay, I want to take action now. But the truth is, regardless of what industry you're in, generally the conversion rate, whether it's like, I don't know, downloading a white paper or actually purchasing a product on an e-commerce store, the conversions are pretty lackluster, right? Like 2 to 3% if you're lucky. But click to call ads actually convert 5 times higher. And the reason why is because when a prospect engages with an ad, they can actually get their answers or their questions answered, right, by calling a toll-free number. But traditionally, if you want to run these kind of campaigns, you actually need a human in real time to pick up every click, right? They need to be well trained in every single nuance of your business because conversations can go anywhere for all kinds of questions. They're also not multilingual, and the worst offender is they only work 8 to 5. So for 16 hours in a day, your campaign can't actually do anything with humans, right? And then the final area for that is the economics also don't make sense because you got to pay these folks on an hourly basis. So if you add in the ad budget, the services to manage those ads, plus the human staff that needs to pick up the call, your CAC or your customer acquisition cost is super high. But now with AI, you can actually put a voice agent behind the toll-free number for a click-to-call ad. So you can get that 5 times conversion while removing all that additional friction that you normally would have with human labor, right? And so after we present a couple of these like use cases that didn't exist before, all of a sudden like, oh wait, now we can do this. I actually have a great idea, right? And so we actually recently talked to a healthcare or a hospital network that's pretty old school, if you will. And at the end of the call, they were like, now we just need to figure out what to prioritize because we can do almost anything based on our imagination, right? So that's really kind of opened up a lot of really interesting conversations where they're actually coming up with new use cases that we haven't even thought of, where it's like, oh, I can be proactive with my patients. Like you're telling me I can get someone a call after a surgery or after, before the prescription's about to expire, blah, blah, blah. Because traditionally we couldn't do that, with humans, it was too expensive. Now we can do all this additional things to make our patient care, patient experience even better. And then they come back with a list of like, hundreds of things that they want to do with AI. And then it opens up so many more quote unquote pilots to work on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that. Somebody myself you come from the product, background. I come from the sales and marketing, in particular sales. And I think one thing that I've noticed in particular with Ambassador when we've talked to existing clients about AI, the conversation can go into multiple different pilots. I think what I've gotten comfortable with over the course of the last, let's call it 30 to 60 days as we do it, is saying no to the other pilots. Because if the client or the prospect understands, no, there's only one use case that you're going to use this for, then there's walls around it. Once that pilot gets executed on and the possibilities open from there, great. But it's all about saying, no, it doesn't do this. It doesn't do that. No, it's not going to do that. No, you aren't going to get that. But then really the first time around, it's, yes, it is this one thing. You're going to get feedback, and that feedback is going to remedy a referral link. And you're also going to understand reviews, surveying, and so forth. Well, can it ping my customer success rep and allow them to book a meeting and then they can have it? No. It could. It probably, yes. But right now, let's keep that functionality at bay because the possibility of that, I think what it does is it introduces, what I've noticed is it introduces a lot of external factors or more people getting involved in that decision making. So understanding what that is, because AI's possibility, I mean, even just ChatGPT alone. I get into ChatGPT and I'm like, oh, let's see if it does this. And I'm like, oh crap, it does. and you're like, wow, it is endless in its possibility. But remember, and you know this, ChatGPT has been around for a very, very, very long time. I mean, even before it hit the market, it was developing out crappy algorithms and so forth. So it has a lot of intelligence behind it that it can do more. But I think as we look at AI, where these companies are going to be successful, and in particular where Ambassador is focused on what's our niche, what's our moat, And let's be really, really good at that, because it's the data underneath, or the underlying data that you're able to extract and engage on. That's what brands, and I think that's what they're going to do.
And you bring up a good point. Focus is absolutely crucial, right? Whether it's in the sales or product process, because you could easily stretch yourself too thin, or maybe even kill a deal, as you kind of mentioned, with introducing a bunch of external factors and so forth. As you kind of think about focus and kind of for Ambassador, in the next 6, 12 months, and maybe even, longer, where do you see the focus of Ambassador, and how do you see that evolving over time with your clients?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from the executive standpoint. From where I would, from the CEO of the company. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people who are working on product and tech and sales and everything. They have their own initiatives. But if I look at it from a leadership perspective, AI is the future. Okay. So I think we recognize that, and we started to make a dramatic change in Q2, Q3 of 24. And I think what we didn't just say, hey, let's build an AI tool and let's see where it goes. And honestly, if I had followed the direction of the market 2 or 3 years ago, go get an AI tool, we probably would not be a business today. I had to have the patience to see where it went, and I had to have the right people on staff to be able to think about it in a meaningful way. So going back in time, in about Q2, Q3 of last year, there was a real fundamental shift that occurred inside the organization that went, what do we have today, and where is the world going? And I think that's where we uncovered the shift from customer engagement and retention to conversational commerce. And then how do we leverage conversational commerce in the data that we are doing today, which is referral, loyalty, surveys, reviews, and incentives. So if I look at now that we've deployed Hero, and Hero is starting to get the meaningful engagement we were looking for with our existing clients, now the tasks of the organization goes, okay, it's working. How do we make this as a PLG, or a product-led growth strategy? So if I look at the next 6 to 12 months, there is not only a capital raising initiative that we have inside the organization to see this at a much larger scale, but there is a product type growth strategy that we're doing. I think for us, it's about getting some of these existing clients to really engage with Hero, and pulling that through, and using Hero to pull through a lot of the other modules and a lot of the other key components in the business. I think then it's showing that type of success and finding a path forward to doing a much larger capital raise that we can expedite the next lift of, Ambassador plus Hero as an engagement. So that's kind of how we're seeing it from an executive standpoint and our next positioning. But I do think Ambassador has a strong hold in regards to being the first agentic feedback platform. Like I really do. I think that we have a clear path to that, and I think we've got a really good set of clients that are open, and they know how to leverage this because they're seeing great returns on the existing Ambassador platform.
Got it. I mean, I really like the approach of wait and see, right? Rather than just being a bandwagon fan, if you will, of all the enterprises saying, "Oh, AI is here, so we're just gonna, say this in all our marketing message and throw the entire team behind it," and find out that they didn't deliver because the team wasn't ready or the technology wasn't quite there. So I think that that patient approach and timing strategically makes a ton of sense. You mentioned Hero quite a bit, but just for our audience, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what Hero is, and why did you guys decide to go down this path?
Yeah. And Hero is still in its infant stages, but you can find it now on our website, which is great. So we can talk about it. We've been hiding it for some time. But Hero is an agentic AI bot that collects feedback for our clients' customers. So one thing that we learned in talking to our client base is Ambassador isn't just referral, loyalty, reviews, and incentives. What we found is that Ambassador is actually used to get feedback And that feedback initiates some type of engagement. So if I'm a customer of Hoka and I love Hoka, Hoka's going to want to send me a referral link, right? They want me to engage with the referral program because I love Hoka. That's feedback. Now I want to take this initiative to go get Geoff to refer Richard or to refer John or to refer someone else. So we talked to a couple clients, and a lot of the conversations were leading to, yeah, but we just aren't doing it well still. We have Geoff, he's super excited, but just sending Geoff an email with a link is not getting him to engage. So well, what else are you doing? They're like, that's it. I mean, we're sending him to a page and we're giving him different incentives and we're seeing what works. We said, well, what if you had a bot that made the phone call or the text message and actually engage the customer, and through proactive conversation, not reactive, which is most AI bots today, but a proactive conversation, and through the conversation and voice biomarkers could actually determine what Geoff should be getting. Is it a referral? What's the incentive to get him to refer? Can you get him to refer right there on the phone call with you? You know, does Geoff actually, is he so excited about Hoka? You heard a review in the phone call. Did you? And so this hero bot becomes this universal voice for feedback. And that's what we're betting on right now, is that hero is going to pull through what we believe Ambassador is today and continues to grow as we call it Ambassador 3.0. But the conversation with hero, which is the value creation, pulls through the value extraction of referral, customer journey objects, incentive layout, conversation layout, all those components on your customer to influence that next action. So that's a long-winded way of how we think about hero, because it's more than just an agentic AI bot. It has the underlying data and business logic that has been Ambassador for the last 5 years.
Got it. And that's super cool to have a new form of receiving feedback and building personal conversations. Just on the topic of feedback, kind of generally in principle, if you think about how feedback is currently provided as well as consumed, obviously before the internet, everything was word of mouth. You tell your friends, oh, I really like this, concert. I like this celebrity. I like this product, and so on and so forth. And then, with the advent of the internet, all of a sudden, folks can actually leave their reviews to the broader world, if you will, outside of their own existing network, in terms of quantifying that with like stars and reviews, and like actually writing out a review in text. How do you see that kind of changing, the paradigm changing now with AI technologies and new modalities for how folks are able to provide feedback as well as consume it?
I think what's interesting, maybe I'll start with the problem of feedback and then kind of how it gets solved. So I'm actually going to kind of bash a little bit on the NPS score, right? So NPS, Net Promoter Score, it's a single question. Would you refer a friend to this product? Right. I mean, I can't remember the brand. I got one when I was done signing up for it. It's like, would you recommend this? And in my head, I'm sitting here going, it's 1 to 10. And I bought 3 products from it. One of them I didn't like. One of them I kind of liked. And one I really did like. What's the NPS score for the company?
Yeah. And then the other thing to add is you just bought it, so you haven't even experienced it yet.
Right.
Right.
I haven't experienced it. So they just think like, oh, quick, give this to Geoff. Right. Just have him rate it. But it's to me, I go, wait a second, what do I rate this on? Is it a 5 because I got a third? Is it a 7? Is it a 1? Is it a 2? And so, again, going to the problem, if I fill that out as a brand, I'm making a decision based on that response. How I develop a product. How I get customer success figured out. Do I have an issue? Wow, this product is amazing. People love it. But then you come to find out they don't. And I'll use Ambassador. We have a score that we give each of our accounts. I'd say probably 10 to 15% of the time we get it wrong because we think they're happy, but it was because we asked them one question. We didn't get into the depth of asking the proactive conversation to rate what's really going on. So to your point about feedback, I think there is false data that is driving decisions in a business because the feedback technology is not advancing. We're still using Qualtrics. We're still using Medallia. We're using these survey tools, which take 14 people to develop it. It takes 4 weeks of approval, 5 weeks of getting. It's like, wait a second. How are we not using the tools available to actually engage our customers in a meaningful way that produces data that actually has the voice biomarkers, the emotion, the behavior, the words that's actually happening? So let's move to your question, which is let's talk about where I think feedback is and what AI can play. It actually can play in that proactive engagement that through the way the words are communicated, whether it's texted or voice, and actually determine what kind of rating this customer should be, which is going to develop a whole slew of new technologies, new segment tools, new data tools, new feedback tools, new sales tools, and this is where I don't think, and this is for Ambassador, this is where we're really betting on that feedback component.
Yeah.
Is a lot of people are just solving like, oh, it's a customer service bot. Oh, it's a lead bot. Right. Oh, it's like you're looking at a fraction of the engagement. We're taking the category of feedback and we're saying, no, you have to be prepared for any type of feedback that customer gives you using AI. And depending on that feedback, you have to determine the next course of action through a proactive bot. So that's where we looked at the problem a little differently just by choosing even one of the most common things, which is the NPS score. We looked at that. We thought about what was wrong, but NPS built into net retention, gross retention, upsell, cross-sell. We started to see that there was so much more to feedback that AI can actually solve if deployed correctly in a meaningful way to the customer. Does that?
Yeah, no, that's great insights and kind of looking at the current state of affairs, right, for feedback and all these kind of archaic tools and processes, and really just doesn't get into the depth of what a person is actually thinking, right? And I tell the team this, that, what AI is able to do is essentially bring out all the unspoken words of a person, like what's actually going on in their consciousness, what's going on in their mind. When you're filling out a survey, just using feedback as an example, you're not getting all the nuances and the extraction of how they actually feel, their emotions, their actual experience, right? But I think, with voice and so forth, all of a sudden when you can actually have a conversation, and, as founders and the CEO of our company, we talk to a lot of customers, it's really in the nuances, right? Where you actually find out what a person's actually thinking, how they actually feel, and then that ultimately informs what the feedback is going to be used for, whether it's a false positive, false negative, or it's actually true. So, yeah, I think kind of the areas you mentioned really will expand how businesses understand their customers, because humans are just so complicated. At the end of the day, you got emotions, you got your psychology, and so on and so forth. And as you mentioned, voice biomarkers and so forth, where you can actually automatically detect how a person's reacting to a specific situation or a product experience is going to provide so much more value to businesses moving forward. So
Yeah. And on that note, Richard, how do you, I think we've become accustomed to, I mean, even for me, text messaging, right? Like before I loved calling people, and my wife jokes about it. Like she would text and I'm like, just call them. I mean, we got like 5 minutes before we get there. If we got to stop at the grocery store, just call them, right? Yeah. And I've actually moved into don't email me, text me if you really want to get a hold of me, right? Mm-hmm. And we talk about how much influence there is with the voice biomarkers. So there has to be a phone call that needs to take place. But you're almost changing the way that the next generation is starting to come up, which is it's behind the keyboard, as they call it. It's behind the text message or whatever. It's like I don't want to have a conversation because I don't want to be that direct. I just want to be direct through text messaging because I don't have to hear or feel the emotion of the other person. I'm curious, does a paradigm shift backwards? Does it kind of like, well, the that group or the next set of customers goes, well, if I really want a more personalized experience, I've got to get back to communicating, and maybe because it's a bot, it removes that I got to go talk to Richard and have the tough conversation. The bot actually makes it easier. How do you think about that? Because I know in your world that's going to be a really big thing, and in our world, that's a question I get a lot. Is like, well, what about the people who want to text? Well, I can text, but you can't tell the emotion as much, right? How many times do we get a text or an email and we're like, wow, that person was super angry, and you get on the phone with them and you're like, no, that's not what I meant.
Completely different. Yeah.
So I'm curious how do you transform that, or how do you think about that,
Yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, customers are going to have their own preference of what channel they have. And I think, kind of to your point, it's been prevailing for the younger generation to just be on a text-based format, right? It's like, I don't want to engage with anybody. I don't want to get on a phone. I don't want to talk in person. I do think that shift is happening back to real conversations and real relationships. And I'll tell you why. So a really interesting case study. There was a company called Character AI. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but essentially, you could talk to any sort of uh, character and so forth, Einstein and whatnot. Dead people to potentially alive people, right? Or even like cartoons and illustrations, if you will, right? And so Character AI initially started out on the web, right? They had voice experiences with some of these influential characters, but they actually introduced a phone version of Character AI. So, and just for the audience, Character AI's audience was generally like Gen Z plus, if you will, right? Much younger generation. But after they introduced the phone version, where people can actually call and get Einstein call their friends, in I believe 2 months they grew to 20 million DAOs. So they grew super quick, and you would have thought, oh, Gen Z doesn't want to jump on the phone and chat, but they actually found it super engaging and super fun, right? So I think with the right experience to build really authentic relationships, even the younger generation that's more kind of stuck in like the text-based format, all of a sudden opens up all these kind of new opportunities. And we've seen a big trend in like the AI girlfriend space, AI boyfriend space, where folks are actually just talking to AI because it's a little bit easier than talking to real people, right? So there is a kind of a mix between wanting to build authentic relationships, but kind of taking the first baby step out into the real world by talking to AI first, and then building up the confidence to actually go out and talk to people in real life. And I think the last part of that, or I call the last mile, is to be able to map voice with vision. So, if you're talking to an AI voice bot, you can't really see, their facial expressions, their body movements, and so on and so forth, right? Body language. And it's just the technology is not quite there yet to actually have a real time, AI avatar that, performs well, and then the voice syncs up nicely. You've probably seen some of these AI avatar companies, and it's just like, it never looks like it's, connected, right? It's like someone else is talking, but their lips are moving, and it's like, kind of weird. So I think once that last mile is, the technology is there, I think more folks are going to want to interact on a visual vision type and audio medium moving forward. So I think authentic relationships are, it's inherent in all of us. We're social creatures. We want that, right? But I think AI will be able to bridge that gap where more people are going to start talking to AI than actually humans in some sense, because they want that relationship, right? But they don't necessarily want to have the full commitment of like having to go travel somewhere and meet somebody and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a nice mix, and the world's going to look a lot different for my kids at least. Yeah.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. Reading the facial expression.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I mean,
because
part of
that.
feedback, I would say, is also just
Yeah.
understanding the body language, right? Like, I would read reviews for my last company, and then when I actually got on a Zoom call with somebody, I'm like, wait a minute, that specific thing that I thought was a positive review had a lot more nuances based on how they actually express themselves. And it's being a product person pretty much my entire career, it's very easy for someone to say, hey, great feature, great product, right, in a email or a text. But when you actually jump on the phone, you realize, oh, they were just being nice, right? They just said it because they didn't want to hurt my feelings. Because when you actually start talking about your features, they're kind of like lackluster, like, nah, it's all right. And then you talk about some other thing that they're actually excited about, all of a sudden they perk up, right? Eyes get nice and big. There's a lot of excitement, and you're like, okay, they said this one was good, but really it's the other thing, right? Based on how they actually presented themselves. So I believe that's the last mile ultimately for feedback, right? And for a product or all these kind of other things where you really want to understand the nuances in your customers. And then AI, will eventually be able to bridge that gap where you can. It's kind of like what's that movie with Tom Cruise, where he's like in the future.
Minority Report.
Minority Report, right? Like where
Yeah.
it's like you're walking through the train station, and it's like scanning your eyes, your face, where you're looking, and the ads are presenting personalized to you, right? And if you're not
Yeah.
happy, all of a sudden the ad changes, right? So a little creepy to think about, but that's honestly where the future is going, right?
Yeah.
With all technology. So
One question and topic, it kind of is shifting gears a little bit, but I do want your opinion on it because it is something that we are we're asked a lot, and we're contemplating pricing for AI. So, you know, the way Ambassador thinks about it is let's not boil the ocean. So like right now we're usage based, you pay for a module. Keep with the usage base, you pay for contacts, you then pay for emails, you pay for text messaging, and then you pay for calls, right? That would be Hero, right? Then you talk to companies like Salesforce and all these other ones, which I don't think a lot of them have gotten it right, right? They're thinking like, oh, is it task based? So because I get rid of, let's just say, an SDR with our AI tool, you pay them 65,000, so you'll take a tenth of that cost and you'll pay me for it instead, or half of that cost and you'll pay me for it. I think that's, remember, it's great what you want as the seller,
right.
but the buyer has to have the budget for it, right? They've got to have, as I would call it, buckets. And if you don't have the bucket, then you aren't getting the budget unless it's a pilot budget. But once the pilot's done, if that budget doesn't make sense or doesn't have it in a like, hey, we're putting aside a couple $1,000,000 in this bucket that's task-based pricing, then you aren't going to get it. So I'm curious, Richard, how you think about the agentic side pricing, how people do it today or how you see them doing it today, and then where you think the next 6 to 12 months are, because that's helpful for us. I've got my own opinions and I shared some of them, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, pricing is quite a tricky area right now just because agentic AI is so new, right? Even customers don't really know what to expect. I'd say there's two areas to look at. First is from the customer basis, right? What are their expectations around AI? The first one is they're just going to assume it's going to cost less than whatever they're using at the moment, right? And it's usually human labor, right? So if I'm paying $1,000,000 a year for, I don't know, a call center, they're probably going to expect this needs to be like 5 times at a minimum cheaper than what I'm paying for. Then otherwise, what's the point of AI, right? The second thing I think for customers is when you think about outcomes, right? Because outcomes can be kind of defined in 2 ways. It's either a task, it's doing a task, or it's actually delivering some sort of KPI for the business, right? So if you have an AI agent that's doing like sales, for instance, I'm going to assume that your AI agent is going to get me the outcome that I want fully autonomously. Like it's going to close X deals per month, or it's going to increase my pipeline by a certain amount, right? So knowing that those are the 2 expectations, I think pricing is going to be tailored around those 2 areas. But the other area that needs to be considered is like, what does the cost look like, right, for anyone building agentic AI solutions? And unfortunately, unlike SaaS, where your server cost, it's pretty easy to forecast. If I spin up a client, here's how much I'm going to be paying AWS, and it's going to be like 10%, right, of the cost so I have like 90% gross margins. But the challenge with AI is that it can do a lot of things, right? And depending on the complexity of the use case, you might be tapping into other external tools. You have all this compute. Now all of a sudden your COGS, if you will, is not predictable, right? It can be pretty volatile, some peak seasons, some not, right? So I'll just give you an example. If you have a lead generation bot, where your end client has, I don't know, January to March, where it's peak, right, for their product. Maybe they have a seasonal product. So your compute's going to be way more expensive because it's like so much more volume, right? And then it starts tapering down. And so that's the other thing to kind of consider is like what's the cost basis for using for delivering an AI solution. I haven't really seen this in the market, but I feel like there's going to be a new type of fintech AI company that's going to help you forecast your cost, based on what AI solution you're giving, and to be able to help you determine pricing to specific clients based on some kind of criteria. Because right now it's kind of a wild west of like figuring out, okay, what's our costs are going to be kind of volatile, and then what's the customer expectation in terms of their budget, expectations, and so on and so forth. So, we've seen other companies doing like, usage basis, right, where it's per minute, if it's for like voice, like 12 to 15 cents, or some more kind of forward-thinking AI, fully autonomous AI companies doing it on an outcome basis, where it's like, hey, we have a base monthly cost. If you want the solution, it's going to be, I don't know, 5 to 10 grand a month, just for the base. But we also get an upside where, if it's helping you do like AI SDR work, for instance, if for every lead that we qualify, you're going to pay us, I don't know, $10 or $20, right? And to kind of control customer expectations where, pricing on a monthly basis in their contract doesn't just go off the roof and, come back down and so forth, all the volatility, they'll usually say, okay, for this base price of 5,000 a month, you get 30 leads qualified, and you got to pay us $20 for 30 leads. If we go over, then we kind of hit you up with a different pricing, but it's like a lot more stable rather than just like going all over the place. So, so I think, yeah, there's a lot of the market maturity that needs to happen, but also new technology that's able to forecast cost and like predict what a customer price is, so that it gets more stable and it gets more adopted over time.
Yeah, there was I was just trying to look through my notes. There is a company out there. I think it was actually Kellen at Fuse who told me he has a buddy that developed a company that does that modeling.
Forecast, yeah.
Yeah, it actually will model out, hey, I've got this AI tool that does X, Y, and Z, and it'll tell you what the pricing should be based on it. I'll have to take a look. I can't remember what it was called, and I meant to look at it, but now you just made me go, I got to go back and look at it. So I'll send it to you so at least you have that and you can give me your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Because I know you're always looking at the next AI thing and how it is, but it's interesting just to kind of think about where it's going to go and how much of a shift it's going to have in how pricing's been done. I mean, I really thought that even, in the marketing world, you have a cost per market, CPM, right? And it's paid on like a per 10,000 units or it's contacts, right?
Yeah.
It was funny because when I was like, data platforms, when they came out, CDPs, I was like, oh, that's going to change. It didn't. It still was charged on kind of a CPM usage model. And so I wonder how much of this is going to be the pricing evolves to something different, or the market has to shift with it. So, you were kind of talking about the DeepSeek and all these where, their price per load and the way that they're doing it is going down, right? And it's like, okay, do we just start getting more companies that can do it cheaper? And then doing it cheaper gives you that ability to just keep your pricing the same. So,
Right.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Geoff, I appreciate you jumping
Thanks,
on
man.
and chatting with us. Just for the audience, if they wanted to find you and Ambassador, where could they find you?
Yeah, just you can ping me on LinkedIn. That's great. Or you can just go to getambassador.com and go check out Hero. It's on the site. It's engaging and so forth. But yeah, Richard, it was a pleasure. Like, I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot, again, as I always do with every conversation with you. And I think this was a very fruitful conversation that I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy.
Absolutely. Well,
Awesome.
Geoff, thanks again for joining us, and appreciate you being on. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, chat
All right.
soon. Thanks, Richard.